Hello, everybody, and welcome back for episode number 6 of the podcast Ready, Set, Shag. I am your host, the Shagsworth. You guys can call me Tom. I don't know. Whoever talks to me, you can just call me Tom. I'm here today with someone who I respect very much. I was finally able to pin him down for a little bit and get to know him a little bit more. He is the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing. He's an author himself, a columnist, has been published in the New York Post, Newsweek, EpochTimes, Daily Mail, and many more. Mr. Adam Coleman, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Not bad, not bad. As I said pre-show, it's been kind of a rough day in some spots, but now that we're sitting here talking, I can unwind a little bit. Work's taking a break, so now we're here talking to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I've been wanting to have you on at least one of my shows for a while now. My Wednesday night show, while a little bit looser and more filled with personality, it's kind of late, and I know you're an early riser and you work hard. So, but yeah, I finally was able to get this show in order in a format that we can just sit down and kind of talk about you as a person, as a creator, entrepreneur. Like there's a lot to talk about, and yeah, thank you for giving me your time. This is great.
Absolutely.
So I always start off these conversations with sort of a philosophical question, because I'm always interested like how people like answer, and some of them are kind of similar, but I the one I asked recently was is there a meaning to life, and what is it?
I believe there is, and I believe it is revolving around happiness.
Okay. Can you go a little bit more specific with what you mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think the people who stray away from happiness, like when I say happiness, I mean fulfillment.
Okay.
And I think that positive things are fulfilling. And the way our society advances is by accomplishing fulfillment. Things that have moved mankind forward have been things that often revolve around being some sort of personal accomplishment, some sort of fulfillment, some sort of benefit to society. There have been things that have changed society, things that have changed society that have been destructive. There have been good things that have been creative, good things being created, but then used for nefarious reasons. So, like religion, for example, it can be either used appropriately or bastardized. But I think ultimately, the way I see things is, as long as you're staying on a particular purpose of fulfillment, that is why you're here. And I think people who have no purpose, or when I say have no purpose, I mean like they internally feel like, why am I here?
Yeah.
Why am I existing in this space? Because I think we are doers. I think especially men are doers, but I think human beings are doers to an extent. We're here to fulfill some sort of obligation to society. It's kind of like ants. You have worker ant. You have all these different ants who have a particular job, and they work in unison with each other, and they build some sort of society together. But not everybody finds fulfillment. Yeah.
I was going to say, how do you think people are today? Do you think people are fulfilled for the most part today?
No.
No, really?
Yeah. I think more people are less fulfilled. They're searching, but they're less fulfilled. I think we are a more distracted society. And that distraction keeps us from finding fulfillment, finding purpose, like genuine fulfillment. We've replaced genuine fulfillment with things. I've spent a period of time in my life where I'm still somewhat of a car guy, but I was really into cars and modifying and buying all these parts. But when you escape that world, you realize, like, what did I gain from it? Absolutely nothing. What did it benefit me? Really nothing. What do I have to show for it? Nothing. Those cars are gone. Thousands of dollars down the toilet. What did I gain? Absolutely nothing. But the things that gave me fulfillment was when I started traveling, when I started meeting people, when I started helping people. That's what really gave me fulfillment. And And that's where I found my happiness. I think everybody has their different version of fulfillment because everybody has a different job. But for me, all my jobs have been revolving around customer service, helping people, being the solutions person, uplifting other people. Like everything that I've done in my life has been revolving around that, and those are things that I genuinely like. And so that's where I'm trying. That's where I'm trying to like transition into the writing aspect to genuinely help people. To talk about politics and culture from a sense that let's not ignore the people who don't have a voice.
Okay. So your book, you have right over your left shoulder there, Black Victim to Black Victor. I have a copy of myself and was able to read it. It's a very, very good book.
Thank you.
So this is part of your purpose now, right? Is
Yeah.
that book right there, which sort of chronicles your sort of breaking out of the victim mentality and embracing the victor mentality, as the title says. Is that so? Besides that book, how are you sort of pushing that message through the world, or trying to?
I mean, thankfully, platforms like the New York Post gives me a freaking opportunity to push, whether it's that particular message or whether it's a message of let's not forget the regular people in society. Let's not forget the working class. Let's not forget that these particular narratives that they want us to talk about aren't coming from what regular people think. I am very much so someone who is of the working class and the poor. You know, growing up homeless a couple times as a child, single mother household, going through all these different things. And I still have that mindset. I still remember all the different people I would meet. Wasn't from political means, wasn't, or anything like that. It was just regular people who went to work, did their job, came home, they were your neighbors. And I think that was like one of the things that always stuck with me, moving from state to state. Lived in 4 states before I was 18. I lived in urban, rural, and suburban. And it was just like, people are people, regardless of what they look like. And I think a lot of people live in the same area, experience the same type of people, and whatever they see is what America is. And
Right.
what I'm trying to say is, I'm a guy who doesn't have a college degree, who went to tech school, who has no formal training in writing, but I know how to tell a story and I know how to speak for regular people. And I try not to take for granted that I'm given an opportunity to represent regular people.
Here's a question though. Like it almost sounds like you're making a case to be a politician yourself. Is that something that
Oh God, no. To be honest with you, how I truly, truly feel about politics isn't personal to me. So for a lot of people, they're like, oh, my team's losing.
Yeah.
Politics is no longer personal to me. And even a while ago, it wasn't really personal to me.
Okay.
The reason politics is personal to me is because I don't think politics are the end all be all for everything. I think much of the things that we're talking about is cultural related. It's personal.
Yeah.
People overdosing, it's not because of a politician who made it into office.
True.
Kids growing up without their fathers has nothing to do with politicians. 99% of the time, it has to do with interpersonal relationships, how we interact with each other. These are the things that I'm trying to have an influence on. With my book, I wanted to tell the story of the kid who grew up without his father, because not a lot of stories are written from that perspective, or at least are honest.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of stories are very like, my father wasn't around, my mother was amazing, and it's like, no, my father wasn't around, but my mother picked him, and so, I can still love my mother and criticize her. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's actually what love is. Love is, giving criticism towards someone in a healthy way. And what I wanted to do was be healthy in my criticisms about both my parents, but even more so, talk about the experience of a child who does grow up without his father. And granted, every child is different. You know, everybody has a different experience, but I don't think I'm far too off when it comes to what it's like in that situation, or what it's like for a lot of young men who grow up lost, who grow up without that purpose that I was talking about. And that's where the father, in my opinion, is supposed to be that guide for their children.
Right. Now, where do you think for those people who haven't read the book or, you know, are unaware, like where was it for you that things sort of like turned and you found your purpose? Because I think I was asked yesterday by a friend of mine who's also a content creator about like how do we give people purpose? Because I agree with you. I think people lack purpose. I think we're given I think these things are meant to be small doses of purpose. And people think that's it. That's all my happiness is locked in there. And without it, it's not that, you know, but what is it that you found was your purpose that maybe someone else could find?
Well, for one, I don't think anybody can give you purpose. I
Okay.
think you have to be exposed to the world to seek it out for yourself. You have to listen to you. Um, I think often we don't listen to ourselves. I went through a long time with self-esteem issues, which relates to you don't believe in yourself. Hence, you don't listen to yourself. You don't listen to your gut feeling, that instinct. You doubt yourself. And all these things kind of play into you avoiding what your actual purpose is in life. So when I stopped doubting myself, when I started listening to myself and started trusting my instincts, that's when I started heading towards that direction. As far as you were asking about me personally, what transition, it was a series of things that happened. A lot of it had to do with me getting over my social anxiety, which was interesting because I didn't realize how bad it was until I got over it. But it would be something where I would be afraid to go somewhere because I'd never been there before. Worrying about, like, if you said, let's go to this restaurant, in my head, I'm like, well, when we get inside there, where do we sit? You know, what if I bump into this? Like, I'm just thinking of all these like chaos scenarios about going to a restaurant, you know, some very simple. And that was hindering me in life. And it was going from things like that to myself, doubting myself. But when I started traveling and I started solo traveling, it's like throwing yourself in the deep end because everything is new and you have to trust yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
I used to feel the exact same way. Like the social anxiety I would experience, especially in high school, and then early college, because I did a year and a half in college. So there, like the whole public speaking thing, standing in front of people, it was like I was the kid like literally shaking when they were called to come up and even present or just to give your opinion on stuff. I just was so worried about what everyone was thinking. And then it took me, I guess, similar to yourself, like forcing myself into these scenarios that I just couldn't possibly escape, and then stumbling several times, you know. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You were still going.
no, you're perfectly fine. Yeah, very much so similar. But the solo traveling, I did a 2 weeks bouncing around Europe, and I came back home, and I was so relaxed that I was like, no, this isn't like vacation relax. You know, we're like, oh, I feel good. You know, no, this was like I was at ease, I was at peace.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment on, I started chasing things um, that were new. You know, I was trying new food. I was going to new places. When I started traveling abroad, I would trust my instincts and say, no, not there. Yes, you know what? I'm going to go there. You know, I was trusting my gut, and every time I listened to myself, it worked out. But to kind of bring it like a religious angle to it as well, that's also when I started understanding that God helped me. And that voice is not just my voice, if that makes sense. And so much of the instructions, much of the purpose, and even the struggle that I went through throughout my life, I feel like it was a test.
Mm.
So that I think the struggle has made me stronger than a lot of people. It's just realizing that you are actually strong, and that struggle was necessary. Yep.
So I have a question, because so this is a theme I hear a lot. I've probably spent hundreds of hours at this point sifting through religious videos, faith-based videos, having conversations with people about faith. And the one thing that they say all the time is that voice, listening to him, big H. And I have to wonder. I mean, and it's like, obviously we all pull strength from somewhere.
Yeah.
And I can't, and this is the agnostic part of me who just doesn't really want to quite cross the line. Isn't it more empowering that you did that, you listened to yourself, and it wasn't someone else? I mean, I understand, and but it's a question I've been asking to people, is why not just believe in yourself?
I think it's both. I believe in myself because God believes in me.
Okay.
So standing in front of that crowd, I shake, but I feel like I get strength from God as well. And because I believe in myself and I believe in him, I'm even more powerful, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So it's not to say, a lot of people say all glory to God, as to like take it away from themselves completely. But I think it's a union.
Okay.
It's a union of people. It's a union of a relationship that makes you feel stronger, even than by yourself as someone who doesn't believe. And I don't know. It's very hard and I'm still relatively new to being a believer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually looking to hopefully sometime this year get baptized.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's very hard to put into words when you feel. I'm very much so like a sensitive person.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel stuff and I feel for people, and I have like this instinct about emotions and reading people as well. And I feel this particular way, and I felt a particular way, but I was always questioning it. And when I stopped questioning it, it was like my entire life changed. So as much as I was agnostic before I became a believer. I always felt it was too certain to say I'm an atheist.
Right.
So I was skeptical of both sides of it. But when I stopped and just actually was honest with myself and started listening to myself, everything just started making sense from that particular angle.
Okay.
Everybody talks about the highs, like, oh, God helped uplift me. But I think about the moments where things could have gone really bad and it didn't. Okay. And where I was, just moments away from this bad thing happening, but something shifted and it didn't. And I remained safe. I think about things like that. The moments where, even just being homeless, encountering people, the moments where, I was put in a situation to help somebody when I could have easily not been there to help that person. I think about those things. Could it be coincidence? Sure. But when it happens over and over and over in my life, I think to myself, it fulfills my purpose to help these people, or to be in this particular position, to run into these people, to impact their lives, or to impact my life. And I don't know, I just think of all these things and I try to put it all together, and it just makes sense from that perspective.
Yeah, no, and this is something that I encounter with with many people, and everyone I've talked to has had like a similar sentiment as far as their faith goes. And I did, and this is where, because there's part of me that wants to take that leap forward, but the other part of me, the skeptic, remains on the other side of the line, seeing like, though, in those moments where I didn't let go, I draw my power more from the fact that I did not let go, and that comforts me more than than God or whoever. And again, it's something I grapple with, because before, like, I would say, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, I was I was ruthless in my opinions against Christians and all that. Like, just didn't care for them.
Yeah.
And now like, something, obviously since COVID hit, was to like really challenge myself into like sitting through things that made me uncomfortable, sitting through conversations that I couldn't like. And because I thought about how I just would give up on things, and so I'm having this sort of, not opposite experience, but just different experience, where I needed to know that I could pull myself through something before I could like believe that there was something just beyond that, or I guess, way beyond that, as it were. But um, yeah, you know what I mean. Like, it's no bash on people who are believers, because I know it
Mhm.
helps them. Like, my brother isn't a religious person, but when he was going through his 12 steps after his bad addiction, he found his own power. And he was the same way. He did
Yeah.
not. He's not someone who believed in any of this, but I mean, he was hanging on by dear life. And so I know people find different things, but you see where I'm coming from, where it's like, I would just take the sort of tangent approach of like, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah.
um yeah, but it's
I
not this. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, like I said, I came from the same avenue as you, being agnostic. So I completely understand, and listen, it's not to say that I'm not skeptical of certain Christian practices, or self-proclaimed Christians who
Yeah,
behave in a particular way. I'm very critical about them, more so privately.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I completely understand. I do think, this is not towards you. I do think that a lot of people end up using the worst example of something as a determination of what something is.
yes, I agree.
Um, so we can name. You see me on Twitter talk about like crime, and they're like, "Look at all these bad black people doing bad things," and I'm like, "Yeah, nobody likes those people.
Yeah, right, right.
They're not the example of It's stuff like that."
Yeah,
And I think the same thing happens with people of particular faiths. Where I remember when I was in high school and 9/11 happened, and there are people who are like, all of a sudden, these Muslim people who have been in America all these years, now they're looking at him side eye.
right.
But like, but that's the worst example of these people. But
Yeah,
it's they're the other. And I think sometimes for people who are not Christians, like I said, not you, but I'm just saying, like, in general, they see and they see the worst. Like, they see the charlatans. They see the oh yeah, just put more money in the collection plate and God will bless you.
yeah,
They see
yeah.
those people, and I don't like those people at all.
Right. No, it's funny you mentioned that, because there's a friend that's on Facebook who constantly disparages, the right, and Christians, and all that stuff. And they do just that. They use the worst possible example. I'm like, who are you trying to convince? Nobody likes these, like you said, nobody likes these people. Like, they'll bring up, pedophilia in the church. Like, I don't know one Christian who's like all for that. Like, nobody I know. It's just such a strange thing that people fixate on. But I was the same way. I was that way, like I said, probably 3 or 4 years ago, when I was still sort of searching, and when things started, like, when I started realizing things were off in the world, and it's like that the glitch in the matrix that a lot of people experienced, and mostly sort of it hit critical mass during COVID because everyone's just sitting around, right?
Yeah.
And really that's where it kind of came for me, was like, I maybe this is what I have to do. Maybe I have to like really think about like who are these people? Like, who are Christians?
Mhm.
What do they actually mean to me? And or what is this thing that I keep, and really the big question was, who is Trump? Like, it was the first thing I like really asked myself was, who is this person, and why am I being told every single day, all day, to hate him? Like,
Yeah.
like, and it's and what's funny now is I just saw this story yesterday. It was from BBC. They just set up their own fact checking, like it's called, what was it called? I had it written down. It's like BBC Verify is what it's called. You should look it up. And what it seemed to me was like they saw what Community Notes was doing on Twitter, being able to like verify stories and add context to them. And now BBC wants to get ahead of their lies. So like, to me, this is just like everything that I've been looking at is just, now it's all verified by this, oh, we're going to fact check ourselves, or we're going to start fact checking people. So when someone comes out and says XYZ is wrong, we can quickly shift the narrative. So they don't really have to get better at journalism. They just have to get better at covering their tracks, which, all this stuff is just, it keeps compounding into things that I thought to be true now seem to be known to be true.
Yeah.
Which, I don't. Well, and one of the reasons that I originally like sought you out and started following you on Twitter was because I was convinced for years that conservative, black people couldn't be conservative. It just wasn't a thing. It just wasn't a thing. So when I discovered people like yourself, and I mean that in like the most literal way, like when you're in that sort of progressive space, there is no room for that. Like there's no room for that narrative, and it doesn't exist. So when I started seeing people like yourself and Colonel Allen West and every other person out there who was, like told that it wasn't in existence, I was like, oh my God. And then I started seeing people more my age that were like sort of like working their way into the space, like on TikTok and stuff like that. And I thought, wow, this is just one massive lie being perpetuated. And for what, and really the point I was trying to make with the BBC Verify thing was, in one of the segments that they're talking about it, they discuss right-wing figures, but there's no left-wing figures. Like they're talking about trying to follow money from like alternative news sources to right-wing figures, and then to their media outlets and stuff. So I'm sure you're on their list, just so you know.
Perfect.
but there was no, they weren't talking about following left-wing figures and where their money is going and how that's feeding. And then that to me was just like, again, this is the problem we're facing, is that there's not a fair and balanced system where people can actually take in the news and think, does this affect me? Is this something I need to know? No. But instead it's constantly pushed that we have to hate conservatives.
Yeah. I think so there's a number of things I want to touch on.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that you said was, when you're ignorant, we're all ignorant about something. It just means you have a lack of knowledge about something.
Yeah.
I'm ignorant about being a surgeon. I have no idea what it's like to be a surgeon. But when you're ignorant about something, it's good that you want to seek out information about it. And I went through much of the same thing as you. I wasn't a progressive. I was, kind of similar. I haven't really changed all that much, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's just that the political climate has shifted, and it's put me in a particular position where I'm no longer viewed in the same way. I'm no longer on a particular side.
Yeah.
But that also allowed for me to meet people that I actually just didn't really know. Like I didn't really, in person, growing up in the Northeast, in person, I didn't know really any people who were Republicans, or at least who told me, right? I
Yep.
knew people who were Democrats, and it was safe to assume that most people that I ran across were probably Democrats.
Yep.
But I never really I think I knew one for sure, and he was an asshole. But outside of that, I really didn't know any Republicans. So this is the first time I was around Republicans and conservatives,
Yep.
and really talk to them, and really listen to right-leaning media, and actually hear it from their mouth as to what they want and what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Where I was getting the right-wing perspective from a left-wing filter.
Yes.
And the thing that you were saying, how they say right-wing figures, or they'll say, I've heard people say, there's no left-wing media. And I'm just and they get away with that. And the reason why they get away with that, well, the reason they have to get away with that is because they have to pretend that they're calling bulls and strikes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if they can say that the Republicans want to bring in bigotry, and you don't see that source as a left-wing source, then you think that Republicans want to bring it. You'll actually believe them.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're watching right-wing media, they don't hide that they're right-wing media, and they'll say, I'm giving a right-leaning perspective on what they're trying to do. So at least you know that they're being honest about their position. I'm saying this from a conservative position, and I think they're a bunch of socialists.
Yeah.
Does that mean that they're a bunch of socialists? No, but that's their perspective. But at least you have that. And I think the trick has been that mainstream media and news outlets have completely succumbed to being left-wing operatives, especially Democrat cheerleaders. And so there are a lot of old guard kind of people. When I say old guard, probably older people who still believe in the illusion of fair, they're telling the truth. They're calling balls and strikes. Just say they're doing real journalism.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who still believe that, but not as much as there used to be, because a lot of people have seen beyond that.
Yeah.
That is why stuff like your podcast and other independent media sources, why more and more people are getting their information from social media and different websites. There's a reason why, and it's because they do not trust the mainstream media, and they have good reason not to trust them, at least blindly trust them.
Right.
So it's just funny to me when people haven't seen that glitch in the matrix yet. I saw the glitch like you did. There are multiple glitches when I was like, something's not right. Matter of fact, I'll just say this real quick.
Yeah.
Jimmy Dore was one of the bigger wake-up calls for me about the Democrat Party. And I was, oh shit, I never knew that. How come I didn't know that? How come I didn't know that? And even stuff that's reported by mainstream media outlets, but they bury it. They don't highlight it. It's never headline news.
Yep.
And he's putting it all together. I was like, holy shit, they're corrupt as fuck. And then the kicker was during the 2020 Democratic primary, what they did to Bernie Sanders, and how everybody dropped out when Biden won. I believe it was North Carolina.
Yeah.
Biden won North Carolina. He was doing terrible the entire time.
Yeah.
Biden won nothing. He was bumbling, stumbling. He was yelling at people, shaking hands and stuff.
Yeah.
He was terrible. I was watching every day. He wins North Carolina, and everybody drops out except for 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
But the people who didn't drop out stayed in long enough where Bernie Sanders couldn't get enough delegates. And I said, these people are crooked. And lo and behold, one of the people who didn't drop out, Pete Buttigieg. What happens to him? Oh, he gets a job.
Yep.
It's just, it was stuff. That was when I was like, I am done with the Democrats. But the lesson to be learned about all of that, and I tell people this all the time, it's not to go from left to right, to go from Democrats to Republicans. It's to say, if I got fooled by the Democrats, then I need to be skeptical of everybody.
Yes.
That's actually the real lesson. I think a lot of people just jump ship to the next ship so they can be a part of a team and wear the varsity jacket.
Yep.
For me, I just want to know what the truth is. You know, if you're biased, just tell me you're biased.
Yeah.
And I'll make a decision for myself.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly, because I think people have lost their way among tribalism, and
Yeah.
they just need. And it's not. I don't think it's anyone's fault. People, we're social creatures, and we need. Even if you put people in a room with two different color hats, they're gonna. Like people will find ways to connect,
Yeah.
and down to their favorite color, political affiliation, whatever, and that's where I'm at. I've told people very much the same thing. It's not about whose team I'm on, because there's plenty of people, of Republicans, who have sold out, and
Yeah.
who make the same exact mistakes. There's, like, most of us just need to use our head, and not, and like you said, and to just put a finer point on it and be a little nerdy about it, is people just need to touch grass.
Mhm.
You need to go outside and interact with your community, with your family, your community, township, like whatever, because you'll realize that while it's important to get behind issues that are important to you, a lot of the stuff that's being fed to you is just meant to poison you against someone else. Again, like, I can say that I respect Christians and I like their values, or I live in a very Mormon area. Like, all these people are great God fearing people, and they're so nice to one another. But when you use the lowest common denominator, like, to describe who they are, you're
Mhm.
doing no one a service. All you're doing is trying to pit one against the other, and it's just not helpful. And that's sort of the conclusion I came to. It's not about Democrat to Republican or vice versa. It's about realizing you've been duped, and don't get duped again.
Yeah.
You don't want to do the same thing on the opposite side, or just become the thing that you were fighting, right? If you're a Democrat that woke up and realized, like, oh, conservatives have a point, well, don't run to the other side, because then you're just doing the worst thing that you were, so that's good. That's really good to hear, because I don't think enough people say that. Because
Yeah.
what I was going to ask you too is, like, do you consider yourself a conservative at this point? Would you label yourself in that way?
It's weird. Because some of the things that are considered conservative weren't necessarily considered conservative years ago.
Yeah.
So, I've always been free speech.
Mhm.
When I was, theoretically on the left, I was pro free speech. Wrong Speak, publishing, yeah, we're advocates for free speech. Um, and I, even down to people I don't agree with, even down to hideous people, right? I'm free speech. Let them say
Yeah.
what they want. I don't have to associate with them. I don't have to talk to them, but I don't want to shut them up.
Right.
So, I'm pro free speech. I would say socially, I've become more conservative as far as what I think is socially acceptable. Because I think we reached a point where we're just kind of like, well, if it's not hurting anybody for just about everything, but if it's the illusion that it's not hurting people, like, you can slowly start to normalize things, and people don't realize that. Human beings desensitize each other to all types of stuff.
Yeah.
Like a quick comparison. I live in New Jersey, but when I go to New York City and I go in the subway system, and thank God I haven't had to do that in a while. But if I was to go in the subway system and there's some crazy homeless person screaming and yelling, I look, I'm like, what was that? Because to me, that's not normal. Someone who's screaming at the top of their lungs, something is wrong. They're in distress.
Yeah.
But for all the other New Yorkers, they're on their phone.
Just
They're
another day.
just looking down, checking their watch. Just another day. They're completely desensitized to the craziness that they live in, but they still live in a crazy society.
Yep.
They live in a crazy city. And so I think that same kind of thing, when you see something over and over and over, and you're being told this is normal, this is fine, at some point, enough people will just be able to accept it. Well, that's just what it is. And what I'm trying to do is say, no, I do not accept these things.
Yeah.
We human beings haven't accepted these things for what you're saying it is. Or just like, no, this is a bit too far, you know, and I have no problem saying we need to go back a little bit for the sake of harm.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people who are saying what is harmful isn't harmful. And I think that's extremely damaging. So when we talk about things that are like debaucherous and things that are very like denigrating, and it's like, well, you know, that's just their life and they just want to do that. And it's like, no, they're not just doing it for themselves. Like that affects other people. You just don't see it that way.
Right. And what I would add to that is I would say, I don't care if someone lives a debaucherous life, but it should not be pushed as something that's normal to do, because that's where it becomes, that's where down the line it becomes, and that we find ourselves in that place now where, like, I know the whole, the trad thing, the traditional wife, I know we're not going back to that sort of thing, but like people want to like, oh, it's just demeaning women. Like, no, like now we got to find a healthy balance. Like it's okay to say to someone, you know, or it's okay to live your life in a traditional way. We don't necessarily have to constantly push that lifestyle. Or it's okay to, I don't know, I mean, you won't agree with this because you're a Christian, but it's okay to do OnlyFans, but it's not okay to be like, it shouldn't be okay rather to push that as like a viable career and say that it's what's the word I'm looking for? That I want to say, like, you shouldn't feel good about doing that. Like, you can feel however you want about it.
Like
but
you're a private business owner. You're an entrepreneur.
Right. Yeah. And like, that's where I like draw the line with all this stuff. Cause I don't care how people live their lives. It's when these things work their way into being like a normal way to live your life. It's like, no, it's not a normal way to live your life. You can live it that way, but it shouldn't be a way that people can be told to live. Does that you understand what I mean?
So actually, one thing I'll say is this, and I think a lot of people, I think there are a number of people aren't this way, but I'm a realist.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those people who's willing to let people fail because I failed.
Right.
And I think sometimes you have to learn from your own failure. Mm-hmm. So, you know, this random person who's on the internet who has no direct impact in my life, if they want to become a hooker, then let them become a hooker. You know, if that's the choice that they're making, because they know, like, no one's like waking up one day and accidentally falling into prostitution and having no idea what it actually entails.
Right.
And it does, and I would imagine it doesn't take long once you get into it to see what it actually is.
Right.
If it's their choice to continue to do that, then it's their choice to continue to do that. Let them fail. My issue is the issue that you said by saying that. I can't remember what the progressive term is for prostitute. They're just sex workers. The sex workers have rights and they deserve respect. It's like, no, throughout human history, we do not respect these people.
Right. Yeah.
You know, they exist. They serve a particular purpose for a certain clientele, right? But we do not respect them, and we do not respect them for a particular reason. And by lying to them, because it's not even just like a social thing, like it's an American thing. It is a human thing. Throughout human history, we do not respect the women from the brothels, right? They are there. They perform a particular job, right? But they are the people who are on the outskirts of society, and they are there for whatever reason.
Yeah. But
we do not hold them up as some sort of pillars of the community that deserve equal respect as the person who's actually building a business, who's actually providing work for other people, who's doing something beneficial for society.
Yes.
You know, that to me, and to be honest with you, it's not even just a prostitute angle. I'm seeing it from the John angle. There's a lot of guys who are starting to be like you probably heard of like the passport bros.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the illusion that they want to paint is like, these losers in America all of a sudden go to other countries and they're just magnets for women. And it's like, no, they're paying prostitutes. Like, who's falling for this?
Right.
The majority of those guys are actually paying prostitutes. Some of them are actually like are world travelers. They really care about the culture. So not to say paint them all that way,
Right.
but a lot of these guys, especially the ones who take shots and they're in hot tubs, all of a sudden they're in the Dominican Republic. They got 5 girls who are hanging off them. They're paying prostitutes.
Yeah. Yep.
They're part of the economy. So it's both sides of it.
Yeah, it's certainly that's one of been the big interesting things about, you know, like just how depraved people have become for,
Yeah.
and I don't even know why, you know, like I don't, and I still don't understand like what people are trying to accomplish. And this is something that will come up like on Facebook. Like I'll post something about, it's not even, it had nothing to do with necessarily the like the maps thing or, you know, groomer thing, if you, however you want to put it, you know, but it's somehow like I'll post something about DeSantis or I'll post something about Trump, and all of a sudden it becomes about that. Like it's not really happening. I'm like, why are you even like, this should happen 0 times. It should be like kids should not be involved in any sort of like in any sort of sexualization, not even a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And even like, you know, and even how sensitive the trans issue is a lot of times. Like if a story comes up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories come up of a detransitioner or a mom talking about how they coerce their child into gender affirming care. Like even if it's a handful of times, that's way too many, and every single person should be against that. Like, how do we get to a point where that is an issue that we're trying to defend? Like, and you and I are being like lambasted as like extreme right-wing transphobes. It's like, excuse me? Like, like if anything, I don't necessarily even have a firm opinion on it. I want to know everything I possibly can about it first. Like, and you know, sorry, and I'll kind of pass it to you. What do you, where do you think?
I was going to say that there's a reason why I don't talk about trans stuff all the time on my timeline.
Yeah.
My opinion has always been, for the most part, like what we just said, if you want to live your life a particular way, as long as you're not hurting other people, like genuinely not hurting other people, I really don't care.
Yeah.
Right. Doesn't mean I approve of everything that you're doing. Doesn't mean that I don't think that what you're doing is kind of weird. Right. But as long as you're not hurting anybody and also when I say hurting people, not trying to portray your depravity as some sort of social good. And it's just an option how you live your life. Like, no, don't be that guy. But if you want to be the weirdo who wears diapers, then go be a weirdo who wears diapers alone. But don't go on television to be like, oh, it's just an alternative lifestyle. Don't be that person.
Yeah.
But as far as like the trans stuff, if you're an adult and you want to do stuff to your body, listen, people put horns in their head. Like, I don't agree with that, but you know what? That's your body. Like, if you want to do that to yourself, do that to yourself. I can't stop you.
Yeah.
My only position has been children. That's it. Right? If someone is going through this and they're in distress, then find out why they're in distress. Find out if there's something underneath that. Right. Because 9 times out of 10, there are. Mm-hmm. You know, I have a friend who's a therapist. Who's her name's Pamela. She's written on Wrong Speak before, and a great person. But she's been deep into this issue. They all have some sort of, I guess you could say, like comorbidity. They all have some sort of underlying issue.
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
Yeah.
And it is not, especially for the girls who are doing it, they have some sort of underlying issue that's happening. And we need to help them when it comes to that. But confirming the delusion or confirming that, you know, this is what they want and you must do this. You know, I don't even necessarily have the greatest of problem, because I remember years ago, this topic would kind of sort of come up, but it would be from a sense like, should your son dress as a girl?
Yeah.
Right. And some people are like, nah, I'm not really comfortable with that.
Right.
And some, you know, it's like, it's a little bit weird. But I think there were people who are kind of like, if it's that much, then just let him have it. But this is a whole extreme level. Should your child mutilate themselves?
Yeah.
Should your child ingest, puberty blockers? That's a whole other level, stuff that you can't really take back the amount of pain and discomfort that they might go through.
Right. I saw this compilation yesterday, and admittedly, I'm part of the problem because I am on TikTok. But I found this compilation of detransitioners talking about their I guess well their adverse reactions to their bottom surgery, essentially. And how it needs to like that should be a video that should be looped for about 5 minutes for anyone considering like snipping anything off, because
Yeah.
I mean these women, or these trans women, all sit there and they're like, I have to, if I miss one dose of my dilation pills, like it, there's issues. If sometimes there's hair, so there's an infection, and there's all these things that were, it was just so gross to hear, but you could tell that they were in like legitimate pain, and like this was, and they didn't say as much, but you could tell that there was some. I mean, I don't ever walk around being like, oh shit, you know, sat on these today. Like it rarely happens. I don't have to like worry about taking medicine to just function on my day to day, Like,
Yeah.
I mean, most men don't even know they have anything hanging between their legs because it's been there since day one. But then all of a sudden, you know what I mean? Like all this stuff. And I don't understand how we're not at that point, and how it's like kids are experiments nowadays. And I know you don't necessarily talk about this all the time, so we don't have to push any further. But
No, the only thing I'll say is, because you're asking like, why is this happening? It's because there's a financial incentive that's now at play. Doctors, not even doctors, hospitals, entire hospitals are dedicating their time and money and resources for this trend. Why? Because there is demand for it. And so they're doing it. They're willfully doing it. My wife, she used to work for a plastic surgeon. And he didn't do this stuff. He stayed away from it.
good.
But there were doctors who were part of the same organization where they were booked up to a year.
Oh my God.
Like it was ridiculous. It was lucrative, and they just did it. They did mastectomies, boom, taking breasts out left and right. And I think for the most part they were adults who were doing it.
Yeah.
But it's just the idea that there is so much demand all of a sudden to remove your breasts, and no one's curious as to why that's the case. But there's a financial incentive for these hospitals, and now children's hospitals, they're coming into play, wanting to be part of the gender affirming brigade. There's a financial incentive. Anytime I see something and I'm like, this doesn't make sense, like why is this happening? Almost every time it's the most powerful and the wealthiest people are involved. So you have these powerful, wealthy healthcare institutions that are saying, hey, this is a new moneymaker. Let's get on this game. You have the most powerful politicians who are all in support. You have the most powerful, celebrities, Hollywood entertainers who are all in support. The billionaires, corporations who are catering to this stuff. It's now part of your insurance. There is a financial incentive to all of this stuff, and money talks. So as long as there's money for this stuff and it's legal, they're going to keep doing it.
It's heartbreaking. Because
Yeah.
that's. Do you have kids?
I have a son.
Yeah. Like when you have kids and you see how, like, I get teared up when I see a TikTok of a kid saying "I love you" to their dad. Like
Yeah.
that's like, I mean, kids are so innocent. They look to adults because they don't know, and the only thing they do know is that person has the answer. That my dad or my mom or that adult has the answer that I don't have. And it breaks my heart when I hear that, a kid goes through gender reassignment surgery and now all of a sudden they don't want to do it, or they weren't told like any of these things, just it makes me think that I don't even, it makes me think the worst. And I don't even want to say what I think because it's not fair, but I don't see a good to it. Like openly experimenting on people is what it seems like
Yeah.
in broad daylight. And that's, it's just sad. And I feel like one of the things, and the only benefit of the doubt I'll give is I know that one of the problems with society today is that we are given, whether it's an issue we agree with or disagree with, we see it on repeat a lot. So we're made to believe that something is always there, like the boogeyman's constantly like over our shoulder, which isn't exactly true. Like the gun issue, guns, there's a lot of gun violence in the world, but it's not necessarily the issue that it's made out to be.
Yeah.
But we're meant to believe that AR-15s are the problem, where there's a whole other part of the equation nobody wants to talk about. Zero people. And I think the same thing is true with the trans stuff. I don't know exactly how much it really is happening. I assume less than I think in my head. It doesn't make it any less heartbreaking. And like we said before, when it becomes like, this is a normal way to live your life, that's where I start drawing the line and being like, I don't know. I don't think this is good. I think we need to pause. But I don't know. What do I know?
I mean, my only caution, and it's not just with trans, but it's with just about every topic, especially being on a place like Twitter. I think this is why I say people have to go outside.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm a realist. There are always going to be terrible things that happen. Outside of trans stuff, children get hurt all the time. Children get abused all the time. It is a horrible thing that happens, and we should do everything possible to minimize it. But there's almost nothing we can do to prevent it completely.
Yeah.
So it doesn't do me any good by constantly thinking about it when I have no control over it. So the only thing we can do is advocate for people to take control of their lives and affect the people who are around them. And that's how we start to slowly change society. You know, I've talked about the statistics of children who grow up in single parent homes and the likeliness of them being physically and sexually abused. It's tremendous.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a reason for it. There's multiple reasons for it. And if I tell someone that if you love your kids, the best thing that you can do for them is stay in a healthy relationship with their mother or father. If not, you increase the likeliness of them being sexually abused or physically abused.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think if we said that to people, it'll make them think twice. Like, I mean, yeah, we're not getting along right now, but maybe we can. It's like,
right.
Yeah, right. Because you're putting your kid in that situation where the mother all of a sudden has a new step boyfriend.
Yeah.
Or a stepfather or a boyfriend who comes around,
Yep.
which boyfriend situations are even higher likeliness of something to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Or to be at someone else's home because she's out working and there's no one else to help to care for the kids. So you make these kids extremely vulnerable. And that's just with the decision as to who you procreate with. But that's something that we have control over.
Yeah.
So I try to think about what's the root of all this stuff. The root of it is family.
Yeah.
All this stuff. You know, those kids, some of them have parents, especially mothers, who are basically practicing Munchausen syndrome. You know, they're sacrificing their children unnecessarily. You're a girl, right? You're a girl, right? You know, it's that kind of thing. But it's the family.
Yeah. I that's something I say a lot. You know, and because kids are sponges, right? They learn through observation, like especially the first 2 or 3 years, right? There's no school, but they're still learning to talk, they're learning to walk. Everything is through observable environment. And with that, if they see mom and dad constantly breaking down in disarray and can't communicate, well, that's how they're going to operate. But if they see, but there's a flip side to that. It's like no one's perfect, and sometimes we are involved with people that we're not so symbiotic with. But if they watch mom and dad overcome these challenges and learn how to stop and take a breath and then talk with one another and not fight in front of them, they will also learn to do the same thing. They'll start to pick up the good habits, maybe not as quickly as they get older, but this is something that I've said constantly. And I'm sure people give you the same sort of treatment. It's never a viable solution for them because it's not something they can legislate, right? Well, I can't bring that to my politician. Like, what? How does that supposed to do anything? It's like, no, this is hard. This is not going to change over time. Just like we didn't get here by, by one single thing that a politician did. It's a multitude of things. But the thing you have in control, that you're in control of, like you said, is your home. You can keep your house clean. Everyone likes to laugh at Jordan Peterson for telling everyone for him to clean your room, right? But most people can't even clean their rooms, but they're off telling everyone how to change the climate of the entire planet or whatever it might be. Like, well, I bet you if I looked in your bedroom, it's pretty messy and your bed's not made. So on we go. So it's good to know that we share that sort of similar thing, because I think that's the very, very best thing that we can do. It's but it's not easy, as humans, we're imperfect creatures, to say the least. And to get to a point where, and no one's ever going to make no mistakes. We're going to stumble, but the intention should be there to perpetuate good culture, to be, have a solution in mind and not just cultivate problems or, I don't know, not course correct where it needs to be. But it's a tough job. And I appreciate what you do, because I follow you on Twitter. I follow a lot of the stuff that you've been a part of, the news segments that you do. You're a hardworking guy, and I think you're doing a lot of the work that more people need to be a part of. And we're going to close out here in just a bit. But I want to give the floor to you. Any final words that you wanted to give and sort of talk about for YouTube, and as far as what projects you have working on and where people can find you mostly?
Yeah, actually, you have really good timing, because today we made the decision that Wrong Speak was going to dive into news.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we'll be doing not the daily, like, here's the headline, here's the story, but more so of like actual journalism, investigative journalism, but doing stories that maybe aren't being talked enough about, or maybe breaking stuff that is happening out there. And I believe we're going to do something, because the way we started was more opinion oriented, advocating for regular people to write and express themselves and put their opinions out there. And I think we're also going to slowly do that when it comes to citizen journalism, or at the very least, people who have a story, but they don't have a reporter or a researcher to dive in on it. So we will accept tips about what's happening out there. Maybe there's a school that's something crazy is going on, but the news isn't covering it, or they don't even know about it. Then maybe we need to look into it. So we're going to start slow with it. We already have our lead journalist. It's probably a second one that I'm going to be bringing on soon. But I think this could be something good. Like I was saying before, I think regular people like myself need to have an avenue to have their voice heard. And they also need an avenue to have their stories heard. Real events are happening all across this country, and maybe more people should know about it. And maybe we need to have more outlets. And there are outlets that cover it, but maybe we need to have more outlets who aren't necessarily trying to chase a headline, but who are actually trying to feed some sort of nutrients, into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
As to what's going on around themselves.
Well, cool, man. Like I said, I appreciate you taking your time for us here on YouTube. And those who are subscribers around locals, we're going to take a few minutes and talk to Adam behind the scenes. If you guys want a preview of that, or if you want to be a part of that, you can go over to my locals. The link is right down below in the description. You can become a paid member, and you get this whole after segment. But we'll be going for a few more minutes. I hope you guys will join us. I do appreciate everyone. Again, thank you, Adam. and we'll roll the credits. Have a good day, everyone.